Welcome to the Geek Homeworld. I am your host, SavageTechman. We talk sci-fi, TV, movies, superheroes, and all from a geek perspective. You can find us on Blogger, Google+, Twitter, Facebook. We're everywhere. Join the Geek Homeworld. Hello again, and welcome to another spectacularly wonderful episode of the Geek Homeworld podcast. I'm your host, SavageTechman, aka Ed, aka Legion. No. We got a couple segments here. We're going to talk about two of my favorite TV shows that are out. We're talking about Humans, which is now in season 2. Spectacular show. If you haven't watched it, you need to start. You need to get caught up. And we're also going to talk about Legion from Marvel, and it's a little bit different take on what you've read in the comics, so that we're going to be talking about that. So let's get to it. Let's talk Humans. Now, this show, very popular show. It brings to mind a lot of other shows that have done similar things, but not as well and as captivating with the screenwriting here and the production value of Humans, and just that basic storyline of it is just compelling. So just to give you a little bit of background, we'll start with a little bit of a season 1 recap for some of you that aren't there. The rest of you know what's going on as we're into season 2. And in this show, you've got robots, and they're basically thinking machines called synths. That's synths. And ironically, I was just listening to Mr. Roboto by Styx. So I'm Kilroy. And some of you will get that reference. But it made me think of this show, and I've been wanting to talk about Humans for a while. So in our season 1 recap, we're introduced to the Hawkins family. And Joe Hawkins is this lonely husband. He's a stay-at-home dad, and he buys a synth, which is kind of like a robotic assistant to people, and this is in kind of an alternate timeline future, a little farther ahead of where we are now. And his little daughter, his youngest daughter, Sophie, names the synth Anita, and she is played brilliantly by Gemma Chan, and just the acting that's done there is incredible, because she really does act like a robot, how you think one would act. Anyway, so Joe Hawkins buys this synth without the consent of his wife, Laura, and she works all the time, so he's feeling, deprived in a lot of areas, if you know what I mean, and he ends up having sex with Anita, and this pretty much almost tears the family apart. In season 1, there's an episode, or part of the episode, where Anita carries Sophie outside of the house and is kind of cradling her like a baby, and it freaks out Laura, and Laura doesn't trust her. Now eventually down the line, Laura comes around and realizes Anita's okay, and they get used to her and all that. And then we also have a flashback with Leo, Max, Niska, and Anita, and they're hiding in this forest, and they're trying to avoid capture from the real humans, who are starting to realize that some of these synths are becoming more human-like. And we also meet Dr. George Milliken, played wonderfully by William Hurt, and he has this synth named Odie, who's just really adorable. I mean, for people that like the series, he's like one of my favorite characters. He's very kind of simple, And he's an obsolete synth, and he's not the updated version. And he refuses to turn Odie in and recycle him. Dr. George, he has losing a lot of his memory and stuff like that. So that's why he kind of wants to keep Odie around to remind him of things that he can't remember himself. And the reason they want to recycle Odie is because Odie kind of malfunctions in the store and kind of attacks someone in the store. And so Odie kind of goes away into hiding and all that. And he has a bad fate. But later on, flashing forward, we see that Odie is in season 2 being resurrected by the daughter of Joe Hawkins, that is. Actually, it's Maddie is her name, and she kind of hacks the synths and all that, and she's discovered the program that Niska has got a hold of. And Niska, she was basically in a brothel, whatever you want to call it, and she ends up realizing that she's got emotions and she's not afraid to kill people and, that are doing wrong. And later she tries to bring herself to justice. That's part of season 2. She's become self-aware. But because of a program that their creator constructed, Siska unleashes it through the internet in season 2. And now randomly, instead of every robot becoming sentient, sounds like iRobot here a little bit, which I love that movie, and we'll talk about in a sec. But randomly, synths are becoming self-aware. So, interesting. It didn't all happen at once. It's just random ones are starting to notice who they are. Like there's a guy, I think, working in a coal mine, a synth working in a coal mine, and he just all of a sudden gets up and says, I want to leave. I want to go outside. And he just leaves, and they're like, what? And there's that famous saying that people fear what they don't understand. And that is certainly true in the show Humans. As the synths are developing their emotions, people are scared. And it reminds me of, which I'm going to quote real quick, Isaac Asimov's 3 laws. And they state the following, quote, a robot may not require a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. Number 2, a robot must obey the orders given it by human beings except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And number 3, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second laws, end quote. And we all remember Sonny from iRobot, the Will Smith movie, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. Just really good performances there. And Asimov has some wonderful stories. If you've not read Isaac Asimov's novels, you should. And I actually need to pick up a few ebooks myself and read those. But Sonny in the show, or in the movie iRobot, was built with a program that allowed him to bypass those 3 laws. So basically he could become more human. And that makes you think of Data in Star Trek The Next Generation, how Data has, eventually has an emotion chip put in, and he is more than the sum of his programming. And I'm sure you've heard that before. So you can see some of the parallels to some of the science fiction that's out there. And science fiction sometimes becomes science fact. And, there's the whole struggle with the Terminator series and Skynet when it becomes self-aware. And will these machines all rise up, and all these artificial intelligences that may eventually rise up and destroy all of us puny little humans here. So I think that we could kind of quote a little bit and say the only thing we have to fear is a robot awakening. So my question is, are you prepared? So you need to be watching, to get yourself prepared, be watching Humans, and you'll thank me for it. Let us know what you think of the show so far. Humans, a wonderful show. Check it out.
Geek Homeworld Review Preview.
So now we're talking about the new TV series called Legion. And for all you Marvel fans out there, another show put out by them. And this one I actually think is quite intense. It reminds me of Mr. Robot in a sense, just in the intensity of it. Totally different shows, and it's loosely based upon the character of David Charles Haller. And he's from Marvel Comics, and he is the mutant son of Charles Xavier, Professor X, and Gabrielle Haller. He has basically been diagnosed with schizophrenia since he was a child when his mutant powers manifested, but nobody understood what those were. And he hears voices. He has pretty much any power. He is an Omega level mutant, and his powers are pretty much off the chart. And if you name a power, Legion pretty much has it. Later on in the comics, he absorbs powers in a sense, and he has a legion of characters or personas inside of him, what we'd now call multiple personality disorder. And they all have a certain set of superpowers they bring to the table, essentially. And from Marvel Comics, it does say that the name Legion is most likely derived from where Jesus freed a man who was demon-possessed. And when he asked the demon what his name was, the demon said, quote, "My name is Legion, for we are many," end quote. I don't think they're going to deal with it on that level in this series. We're just looking at David Haller as the character of Legion in this TV series as someone with those mental powers. And it's a brilliantly enacted show. There's really good character development so far. Like I said, it's extremely fast-paced, and you really have to watch every episode. The first several episodes are going to all tie together and make sense as we go forward. So if you miss an episode, you're going to get a little bit lost, okay? So you definitely want to be checking out Legion. And they're pretty much in this show steering clear of mentioning Professor X or any kind of X-Men affiliation. And they're dealing with the multiple personality side of thing and mental illness in that sense as a superpower, essentially. So, not to confuse it with X-Men The Last Stand, which had the Phoenix persona as basically a multiple or alternate personality in Jean Grey's head. It's kind of like that, but not to that extent, and they're going a different direction with it. So they're calling it Marvel Legion, but not really having that much tied directly to it. So if you're not watching Legion, I suggest you check it out, especially if you're a comic book fan. I know you're already checking it out. I actually have some of the comics. I'm actually looking at them right now of Legion Quest, and if you've followed that, you know, Legion Quest leads to the Age of Apocalypse, essentially. David Haller, or Legion, was trying to kill Magneto because of all the atrocities he had committed, and at the last moment, Charles, his dad, jumps in there and basically gets a psionic attack by Legion, and then Legion just goes about, you know, apeshit crazy because he killed his father, and Magneto lives. And so that is the harbinger to beginning the Age of Apocalypse. And, you know, when Apocalypse rises to power, it's essentially a world without Charles Xavier. And so that in itself is a fascinating storyline. And we did see X-Men Apocalypse on the big screen, which I had waited 20 years for, at least, and it was okay, but it was not the best of the X-Men movies, I will say. They tried to fix a lot of things. We finally saw Jean Grey's Phoenix in a way represented closer to what it should be. True diehard fans are probably not, happy with that movie. I enjoyed X-Men Apocalypse, but did not love it to that extent. But it was a good movie. But anyway, X-Men Apocalypse and all that, or the Age of Apocalypse with his Four Horsemen, would not have come to power had Charles Xavier not been around to be a good force in the world for change and for mutant rights and everyone getting along together. He's kind of like, maybe in a sense, in real life, he was more of someone like Gandhi or someone like Martin Luther King in fighting for people's civil rights, or in this case, mutant rights. Not to say that this fictional character was better than Martin Luther King. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, as maybe a loose interpretation to real life, that's the kind of archetype character that Charles Xavier in the comics and in the movies and TV series on X-Men portrayed, and that's the role he kind of filled. And so Legion, if you're not watching Legion, you need to get on board, and you need to start watching Legion now. I hope listening to this will excite you to want to check it out, so please do so. And it's on Fox TV, so kudos to them. Let's hope we get a very long, interesting series. And yes, if you'd like to throw Charles Xavier in there at some point, or X-Men affiliation, we'd be happy, more than happy to see that here. So let us know what you think at Geek Homeworld via Twitter, and so check out Legion. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Geek Homeworld podcast with your host, SavageTechman. You can find us on Libsyn, Google+, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, listen to us on iTunes, see us on YouTube, be part of our Mixler chats. Thank you. See you again on the Geek Homeworld podcast.